This is A Geek Leader. Hey, Geek Leaders. Welcome to episode 121 of A Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda, and today on the show, we've got Vennard Wright. He is the CIO and VP of Operations at Ironbow, and we talk a lot about his journey through technology. He's had some pretty cool experiences, including working on some campaigns and some political things. So we talk a little bit about that, a little bit about the election, as far as the security and kind of some of the things that go into all that. We talked a little bit about being an empathetic leader. We talked about creative motivation, how to motivate your team in different ways, and self-awareness, 360 reviews. We also talked about physical fitness and how him being a coach has helped out with his team. We talked about diversity in tech and technology. We talked about having a culture of respect and accountability, all that good stuff. It was a fantastic conversation. I think Vennard and I are more alike than we are different, and really enjoyed having him on the show. And with all that being said, just give it up for Vennard Wright.
My degree is actually in business administration. So I went to University of Maryland, and when I graduated, I was working in finance and contracts administration for the Academy for Educational Development, and not making a whole lot at the time. And I got married pretty early, so I was actually married when I graduated. And my wife, who is a hairstylist, at the time, she was making a good deal more than I was. So what happened is she took a look at my paycheck and said, "Hey, Vennard, you have a degree, I don't. And I make twice as much as you, so what's wrong with that picture?" So I switched over to technology just so that I could match salaries with my wife, and it ended up working out. So I had the, great fortune to have an incredible boss at the time, Frank Beadle de Palomo, who I went to him and said, "I'm very interested in starting to work in technology." And what he did is expanded my position to also take on some technology responsibilities. So instead of just being an operations coordinator that was focused on finance and contracts administration, I also became responsible for our website and doing some light database administration. And I'd always been interested in technology. So I just really started to expand into those areas and to really get some hands-on expertise. And from there, it really took off. So I went and I started my own graphics and web design firm after that, and really started to get a better feel for the other areas of technology as well. And the next formal job that I had from there was with a company called Digex, which was later acquired by WorldCom and became Verizon. And with them, I was a Cold Fusion developer.
Oh, I remember Cold Fusion.
Yeah, I loved Cold Fusion. I loved it. Yeah, it was pretty simple to use. And what happened is when WorldCom came in 2001, they started to do layoffs. So as they laid off people, I would just take on their roles. So I went from becoming a software developer to also becoming a database administrator, later becoming a systems engineer and a project manager. So what started off as being a bad situation because so many people lost their jobs actually turned into a good situation for me, because I got to learn a lot more about technology, and that helped me in the long run. So from there, I went and joined EDS, Electronic Data Systems, which was later acquired by HP. And I joined them to be on their e-travel account. And that gave me more opportunities. So from there, I started off really focusing more on systems administration, but later had the opportunity once again to have a great boss once more, Rob Holder, who gave me the opportunity to become Chief Technology Officer for our ATF and ESA 3 account. And that really is where my career became more along the lines of what you see today. So while I was working for EDS, I got a call from a political campaign that said, "Hey, would you be interested in being director of technology?" And I was open to the prospect at the time, so went in for the interview, had no idea who the candidate was, and it turned out to be Hillary Clinton, which I found out halfway through the interview. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I went through 5 rounds of interviewing, and the 5th interview was with her. And she started the interview off by saying that, hey, you know what? You know way more about technology than I do, so we're not even going to talk about technology. But we talked about everything else. We talked about books, movies, even barbecue.
And so that was for her Senate campaign?
That was for a Senate re-election campaign. Yep. And so I stayed on for a while and also helped to set up the infrastructure for her presidential campaign in 2008. So from there, I went back to EDS and was technical organization and delivery manager, and stayed there for about a year, and then joined Integrations Technologies Group as more of an account executive doing business development type work. And from there, went over to CRGT and became, for lack of a better way to put it, more of a senior project manager, managing some of their different accounts. And I was supporting at the same time a local candidate who was running for county executive, Rushern Baker. And the reason I supported him is because I didn't like the existing county executive, just, didn't think he was a good person, and found out that I was right later on when he ended up getting arrested for corruption, which is a case that made nationwide news, actually worldwide news, because he asked, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this story, but he asked his wife to stuff money in her panties. So Prince George's County was on the map for the wrong reason. So I just wanted to make sure that I was a part of turning around the reputation of Prince George's County.
Wow.
So he actually ended up winning. Rushern Baker, the person who replaced Jack Johnson, ended up doing a pretty good job. So he asked me to join him as CIO for Prince George's County, and I agreed to do that. And I spent 6.5 years with Prince George's County running their shop as CIO. And from Prince George's County, I went over to the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, which is the water company for Prince George's and Montgomery counties, the 2 largest counties in Maryland. Stayed there for 2.5 years, and that brought me to my current position, which is Iron Bow. I've been with Iron Bow now for 3 months, and I'm happy to be in this position because it got me back to the private sector, which is where I spent the majority of my career. And the reason that's a good move for me is because it's a lot more fast-paced. You understand what the outcomes are, and there's less red tape to deal with. Being in the public sector, it can be excruciating at times because of the pace of government. Nothing happens quickly, and there's a lot that you have to contend with when you think about the political landscape and all of the different people that you're accountable to. So it's good to be in this position.
So what's the main difference when it comes to leading the technology groups for government political campaigns versus private sector?
That's a great question. So the biggest difference is that on the public side, it's very hard to hold people accountable because they're protected. They're merit employees, which means that it's next to impossible to get rid of them. So you have to find other ways to get people motivated.
Is that why you can't get Trump's cell phone away from him?
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. And whereas on the private side, you can hold them accountable because in a lot of cases, their employment is at will. So it's people work because they want to keep their jobs, whereas on the public sector side, people know they have their jobs, and in some cases, folks are just looking forward to retirement. And especially in county government, where the elected officials change in some cases every 4 years, or at best case, probably 8 years, and people know that. So they're used to new leaders coming in. In some cases, they're waiting you out, and you really have to find creative ways to get them to do what you need them to do in order to fulfill your mission.
So I guess the leadership style has to be a little bit different. Whereas a corporate technology, you've always got the shareholders, you've got profits, you've got things like that you can kind of use as leverage, where you don't really have that in the public sector.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the public sector side, you're really more mission driven. You're responsible to your constituents. So for me, being in county government and being with a public water utility, both of those, we had people who were watching everything that we do. We had the watchdog groups, and you had the elected officials, you had county residents, and people just want to see that their tax dollars or the rates that they're paying you are going to a worthy cause. So there's a lot of focus on exposing data, being transparent, making sure that you're doing a lot of public service announcements and making sure that folks knew that you were doing exactly what they expected you to do. Whereas on the private sector side, to your point, you really are more focused on outcomes, return on investment, making sure that you're being efficient, making sure that you're innovating quickly. So the missions are similar, but the way that you get things done is really different.
Yeah. Did you find the transition going back to private sector kind of difficult, or was it more like, this feels good, this feels right, or how was that process?
So it has been a slight adjustment. So I've always moved quickly. I prided myself on doing that. And when I was in the public sector, I knew that I wasn't going to make a career of it. So I tried to make sure that I kept my skills up to date. But the biggest difference really has been just getting used to the processes. So there was a lot more, believe it or not, formality on the public sector side because we do have legislation, oversight. We had a lot more regulations. Whereas on the private sector side, I'm trying to make sure that we're putting that discipline in place so that there is a more predictable process for how we go about things. I want to make sure that we're also being a lot more forward thinking than we've been in some cases in the past. So in some ways, the rigor that was on the public sector side was a good thing because you knew exactly how you were going to go about things. But at the same time, just making sure that we don't overdo it. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm mirroring that process to some extent, but trying to make sure that at the same time we're not slowing down progress. So that's probably been the biggest adjustment for me so far because I knew exactly how to go about doing things with my budget, how to go about doing things from a contracting perspective, and just trying to understand how that works on the private sector side has been, a bit of a struggle for me so far, but I'm quickly getting up to speed.
Yeah, I think it's really good. In some of your background, when you're telling it, it kind of sounded very familiar to my background actually, because my undergraduate degree was business administration initially, and then got into tech after that. Partly because of the money, partly because I just loved it. I loved all the changes. I loved staying on top of technology. And then when it came into, I started a web development firm actually too that I ended up selling to a competitor after several years. But when you mention Cold Fusion, I'm like, I remember that. I remember those tools.
Yep.
And then I got into infrastructure kind of as well. More of the server administration, network administration, Cisco world. And I think having your hands kind of in both and being familiar with both, it's the same thing with private, I've worked for nonprofits and for-profits, it kind of gives you that diversified aspect where you can kind of take something here and, you take that information about being mission-driven, understanding you got a tight budget because you're working, for a public sector, and being able to use that and apply that to a corporate environment. It can be very beneficial, especially, when you come in there and use some of the skills that you've developed when it comes to working with contractors, vetting people, negotiation skills. Just seems to make a big difference when you have that diversification. Have you seen that or found that to be useful?
Absolutely, it does. So I think that the fact that, number one, I started off in business administration, which gave me a feel for how the budget should work, how contracts should work. All of those different things, that, number one, was a big help for me. But even before that, I worked for the federal government for 8 years. So I worked with a number of different places, but the majority of that time was focused on HR and personnel. So having that also helped me. But being in a nonprofit really got me used to being focused on social causes, which was helpful when I went to the county government. Being in the private sector got me used to moving quickly and being focused on outcomes, which obviously is helpful when you're moving forward with a very large implementation. And so all of those different things in my career really came together in such a way that I've been able to be successful because I do have those different facets of experience.
So how important do you think it was, having that experience with HR and, the people skills side when it comes to being a leader?
It's very important, because you understand that you can't do certain things or you're going to get yourself into trouble. For example, with people that might have a medical condition. So whenever they go out for the Family Medical Leave Act or they put that paperwork in place, you realize that you have to give certain concessions. You have to give them the freedom to go to doctor's appointments, and you have to give them the freedom to be able to work in a capacity that really doesn't put them in a compromising position, or the company that you're or organization you're supporting. So knowing those sorts of things, I really avoided certain pitfalls. I also sped up the hiring process in some cases because I was familiar with personnel law. Same thing with finance and contracts administration. So with Prince George's County and with WSSC, I put contract vehicles in place called Consulting and Technical Services, which was similar to the IDIQ model that the federal government follows. And I was able to do that quickly because I understood how contracts should operate and because I had that experience in the past. So once again, the experience that I had from before was helpful in helping me to be a more efficient leader. And because of that, I was also able to bring people up to speed and to give them experience that they didn't have before because they participated in the process. So I still pride myself on helping people to understand certain things that I had experienced in the past and to challenge them to step up and to widen their responsibilities as well.
Yeah, I think that's super valuable. For me, I came from coming up in technology. I was kind of like that introverted, not very good leader, not very good, just do it my way or don't do it, kind of thing. And when I got exposure working with other folks and other departments, and I've kind of started to realize the importance of seeing things from other people's perspective, being able to communicate things in the right way, understanding, like you said, the some of the HIPAA and the legal sides of being a leader and a boss, but also just the being able to understand where someone's at and take that into account has really, I think, helped me take my game to another level when it comes to managing people and leading them. So much so that I've even kind of invested into going to human resource conferences and trying to get involved in that community. And it's kind of weird when you show up at one and you're the only guy in IT that's there. But it kind of helps you see things from their perspective and to understand their perspective.
Yeah, that's absolutely critical. So a lot of books and, podcasts and things like that are really focused on that point now, being an empathetic leader and seeing things from other people's perspective. And going back to what I said about one of the differences between private and public sectors, with public sector employees, you really do have to find creative ways to motivate them. And one way that you can motivate them is to really understand where they're coming from, understand what motivates them, and to find creative ways to challenge them to get to the next level of their careers. So I tried to make sure that I did that, especially with team members who may not have been as productive as you'd like for them to be in the role that they were in. So in some cases, it was just a matter of me moving them to a different position, something they were interested in, or to give them an opportunity to try out things that they expressed interest in. So that was one way that I really gave people a pathway to a more rewarding career. Sometimes it meant changing their position title. Sometimes it meant putting them on a different team, or sometimes just giving them a different set of responsibilities. But that way it was a little easier for them to come to work. I mean, we spend enough time in the office. We spend enough of our lives on our careers. So it really does have to be something that a person looks forward to, and to some extent. So I've gotten a lot better at that, and also become a lot more patient in a lot of cases, because one thing that you have to do as a leader is to really take a look at yourself on a regular basis and see where your deficiencies are. And for me, patience was one of them. So I had to realize that, I operated a certain way, I operated at a certain speed, but not everyone was the same. So I had to make sure that I took a step back and understood why a person wasn't reaching a certain outcome in some cases, or why they weren't getting things done as quickly as I would like, and to help them to work to the point where they were more successful in their role.
Yeah, I think having that ability to kind of look back at yourself and having that self-awareness of what are the things that you need to work on is really hard. And I struggle with that, personally. And I tried to get my employees, during one-on-ones to talk about it, to open up, and it's kind of difficult. What are some ways that you've found that you've been able to kind of get that self-awareness to understand, patience is something I need to work on? How did you figure that out?
Yeah, so one way that has been very successful for me is a 360 review. We always give our employees, our team members, appraisals of how they're doing their work, and we always should, because it's unfair for a person not to know what you think of them or areas where they can improve. But it's tough to really get that feedback from the people that work with you. So I would, on a regular basis, I would send those appraisals down to my team members and say, hey, let me know how I'm doing as a person. Let me know how your manager is doing. But I'd also send it to people that were not really in my chain of command. So with the county, I'd send it to the deputy chief administrative officers, which were people that were at a level higher than me, to get feedback about areas where I could improve, things that I wasn't necessarily doing well. And in some cases, they were surprised because no one had ever done that before. But that way, I knew what my team members thought of me. I knew what people who were higher than me thought of me. I knew what my peers thought of me. And those were areas that I worked actively to address. And, that's something that I try to make sure that I'm doing on a more regular basis so that I can identify where those weak spots are and to put measures in place to improve them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one thing I need to probably reach out to our HR group about, getting probably a 360 for myself, because I've actually gone through one of those. But I think it would be beneficial because I try to do one-on-ones. I've even moved my one-on-ones to being like a walking one-on-one, so we're out of my office to try to, because some people are intimidated when they come into their boss's office, to talk about their boss.
Yep.
But I've tried some things like that. But I think that 360 would be a good thing that I can probably benefit from. I wanted to shift gears just a little bit and talk about one of the other struggles that I have, and I've seen, and I live in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, and tech is just like blowing up here, as I'm guessing it is probably everywhere. But the job market's gotten really tight, and luckily I haven't had turnover in a while, so I'm very blessed and thankful for that. But I have some colleagues and friends of mine and other listeners to the show that have written in about, they're having trouble hiring people and getting the right people. What are some tips or ideas that you have for hiring the right person, and what are some things that you look for whenever you're looking for that new guy?
Yeah, that's a struggle for everyone. And in going to conferences and talking to people in the industry, everyone really is trying to solve that challenge. So for me, the main thing to focus on is your how well your team operates, what kind of organization the person's going to be joining, making it a very good place to work. So I try to focus on that, number one, to make sure the culture is where it needs to be, so that when you do get a person in, they stay, number one. So there's a lot that I focus on there to make sure that it is a decent place to work, for starters. And from there, just to make sure that I'm maintaining it, making sure that there is a concerted effort and I guess just the atmosphere of the place. So with WSSC, I put together something called the Motivation and Morale Committee. And what we would do is on a quarterly basis, we would have different events where it was anything from a March Madness celebration where we'd put together brackets and, watch some of the games. We had an International Day celebration. So I had a pretty big team at WSSC. So we had a little over 100 FTEs, but probably the same number of contractors as well. So it was a team of about 200, and we had people from across the globe, literally. We had people from India, people from China, people from Africa, and a number of other places as well. So what we did with our International Day celebration is we encouraged them to bring some of their local dishes in, to dress in their customary garb from wherever they were from, and to share a bit about their home country. So that was a big hit for us. But what it also did is it exposed everyone to the beauty of all of the cultures that were a part of our IT department. And it also, I guess, lifted morale in such a way that people felt they were able to express themselves and what their religion was and what really motivated them to be the person that they were. So those were kinds of things that I wanted to make sure that I built in to our IT department at WSSC. In addition to that, we made sure that we had a monthly recognition of IT Employee of the Month, and that person would get a trophy. In addition to the trophy, they would get a day off, for the work that they had done, ways that they had gone above and beyond what their normal responsibilities were. And that was also a way for us to recognize when people had done something extra, and to make sure that we were publicly recognizing the fact that they had contributed to the organization in a way that was going to help us to move forward. And that was how we cut down on the attrition rate. So in the very beginning when I joined WSSC, we did lose a lot of people because when you get a new leader in, people are uncertain of how you're going to operate. But over time, that attrition rate went down to almost nothing. I mean, people toward the end of my time there, people were not leaving. Lots of people reached out and, wanted to join the organization. So it really became a recruitment tool for us, because people heard how we were focused on culture. And I had the benefit also of working for a CEO, Carla Reed, who was also very serious about making sure that WSSC was a great place to work. So that becomes a recruitment tool because everyone is hearing about how everyone enjoys working for that organization. And same thing at Iron Bow. So Iron Bow has been recognized as a top workplace by the Washington Post, I think, for 5 years in a row now. And so that's well known. I mean, that's a list that goes out to a lot of different people. And, when people hear that it's a great place to work, that helps with recruitment because people want to join an organization that is really focused on culture. So with Iron Bow, we do a lot of different things. I mean, it's there's a joke that goes around that you're going to gain 15 pounds when you join Iron Bow because they bring in food all of the time. There's ice cream during the day. In October, where the entire company's going to Hershey Park in Pennsylvania. So it's lots of different things like that really help it to be a good place to work. But it's not something you can do just one time. It's something that you have to make sure that you're paying a lot of attention to and that you are focused on how your employees view the workplace. And when you do that, it really does help a lot with recruitment because sometimes the deciding factor between two different job offers is which one is going to be the better place to work, which one is going to give me the opportunities to grow, and which one is really going to make it easy to go to work every day. So that's what I try to make sure I'm focused on as a leader.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I've tried to do some things like that with my team as well. And just 2 weeks ago, I think we had it was part of, I kind of tried to incorporate like our planning session with something fun. So I did like planning pizza and play, and we got I bought like the Super Nintendo Classic and the Nintendo Classic and the Sega Classic, nice. And set all those things up on TVs in one of the conference rooms and had everybody come in and play for a couple hours, and just to have fun and have camaraderie of doing something different that's not work.
Absolutely. That's a great idea.
And we did something at my last company. There I managed the web and mobile development teams, and we would volunteer together. And we started out just doing like going to a soup kitchen during lunch and taking a 2-hour lunch and serving and then going to eat together afterwards. And that kind of exploded into lots of events where the team would come up with events, and that really brought the team together. And at that point, we went from having the highest turnover in our company to being the team that had nobody leave in over 3 years, which was kind of a big deal when it comes to mobile and web developers.
Hey, that's a great idea, and it's also a marketing tool because one thing Iron Bow does is they give out T-shirts that have Iron Bow on the front of them, and whenever we go out into the community or do different things, we take pictures with the shirt on. But it's a great way for you to get the name out there for all of the right reasons. Another way for you to be able to do that, rather.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some things so you talked about kind of developing that culture, and that can be kind of difficult and challenging, but there's definitely ways to do it, and I think you've done a fantastic job of moving that forward. What are some ways that you have this culture? It's kind of like a marketing tool, and is that also what you use to motivate the people, or is there other things that you can do to help motivate some folks? Because one of the things I found is that there's always great people that are self-motivated, and there's others that need that little push. What are some things that you can do to get that little push in there?
Yeah, so focusing on culture is certainly a great way to keep people, but not always the best way to motivate people. So what I try to make sure that I do, for starters, is to make sure that the strategy is clear, so that everyone understands what the strategy is, number one, but that number two, they understand what their role is in realizing that strategy. So I've put something in place called the cadence of accountability. The cadence of accountability really maps all the way up to the overall strategy for the organization. So I try to make sure that the IT strategy mirrors whatever the strategy is for the organization. And then from there, put together different themes that we're going to work on in support of realizing what the IT strategy is. And then going down from there to make sure that we have projects in place, strategic projects that are going to help us to realize that strategy. And from there, we make sure that project plans are in place for each one of those projects and that people understand which projects they're responsible for. So the cadence of accountability puts in place lead and lag measures. So the lead measures are just different milestones along the way that help us to realize whether or not we're going to meet our milestones. And the people that are in support of those projects have to report on a weekly basis on what they're doing in realization of the next milestone. So in past positions, the last two positions I've had as CIO, we would meet as managers and team leads on a daily basis. It was a quick stand-up meeting, but once a week during those stand-up meetings, they would have to talk about what they were doing as a part of the cadence of accountability. So the thinking is that if you're focused on strategy, you won't get to a certain point in time and realize that you're not going to hit a target. And if you are going to miss the target, you know further in advance. So that's one way that I used to motivate people, because they actually had to report on what they were doing in support of the mission or in support of their in realization of their responsibility. So that was one way to motivate people, to make sure that they were being held accountable. The second way is, the reality is that not everyone is going to be right for the position they're in or for the organization that they're a part of. Correct. So in that case, you don't have much of a choice but to move forward with progressive discipline. That might mean a performance improvement plan, and just making sure that you were very clear in writing what the expectations were for a person. And in many cases, that does help to correct the behavior that you might be observing. And in some cases, if that doesn't work, then you have to creatively find a way to help them find another position with another organization.
Yeah, basically manage them out somehow.
Yep.
Have you seen success putting people on a performance improvement plan, like to where they actually improve, or is it usually like that's just their first step of realizing they need to find somewhere else?
Yeah, so it's been a mixed bag. I'd say my observation has been that it's been 50-50. Okay. In some cases, the person just is not right for the organization, but in other cases, it's really a matter of the person not understanding what the expectations were. Yeah. And in that case, that I put that on myself, because I didn't communicate that clearly enough in the beginning. And that it also goes back to what I was saying before about sometimes it's just the wrong position for the person. So maybe you have to tweak their responsibilities, put them on another team, or put them under another manager. So it could be a number of different reasons, but the performance improvement plan can help if you're very clear about what you're expecting and it was just a matter of them not understanding what those expectations were.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what my experience is there's, well, it's probably less than 50% success rate for my part. Yeah. But I found that whenever someone's on there, it's either it's almost like that's their cue that they need to go somewhere else, and they make that adjustment themselves, or they really honestly are like, oh, I didn't realize, they didn't have that light shined on them, and then it's like a epiphany that, oh my gosh, I had no idea, and they do correct course and move forward. I really like the idea of the management stand-ups. That's one of the things at my last company. We switched over to Scrum, and when we started doing stand-ups and having that, you call it cadence of accountability, just that kind of culture of, I've got a report of what I'm doing, how we're doing, what's in our way, and all that stuff in front of people, and they realize on their own that they start to notice that, people hear what I'm doing now, and it's important that I'm actually moving forward. And some people respond really well to that, and other people don't. But I like that idea of management stand-ups versus just the individual contributor stand-ups.
Yep, absolutely. And another thing it does is it really helps the information flow. So a lot of the challenges in IT are simply because people are not talking. And, by virtue of what we do, you have a lot of people that tend to work in silos. But what those management stand-ups allowed us to do is to really share information across the board, a heads up on initiatives that we're working on, information that needs to be shared across the board, problems that we may have experienced in the previous day. And that really helped us to head off some things that others might not have been aware of in some cases. But it also allowed us to speed up the troubleshooting process or to find solutions to challenges in a more rapid fashion. So there were multiple times where we'd say, okay, here's what happened yesterday. Maybe this system or this program was moving slowly, and in just a couple of minutes' time, someone else might chime in and say, hey, here's the solution, or here's what I did, and that might have had an impact on that system or that program. But it also allowed us to reinforce what certain expectations or certain processes should be, so we could work on some of those things on the fly. So over time, we became a lot more dynamic organization as a result of just talking, which is free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You just talking, that's the biggest thing. When I've seen dysfunctional teams and even have turned teams around in certain states, the biggest part of that was just improving communications. I still have this firm belief that, even if we disagree on how to get things done, we all typically have good inside of us, and we're all trying to do the right thing. We may see things as being differently, and even when you look at the political landscape today, I'm not a very political person, but the right and the left, I think they all have the same goal in mind of doing what they think is best. They just have different ways of doing it, different ways of getting at it. And I think individuals on teams in technology or anywhere else have the same kind of thing, that they want to do what's right. They just don't necessarily have the same perspective. And when you can communicate openly and share, productively in a good way, and have that speed of communication that the daily stand-ups that you mentioned kind of give you have that ability to kind of share things in a way and understand what's right, what's wrong, and get things from other people's perspective quicker, so that you do work better together and get things done.
Yep, and it's good that you brought up the current political climate, because that was also something that I made sure I focused on, that I think this country needs to focus on, and that's just mutual respect.
Yeah.
So whenever I saw behavior that wasn't, what I would expect to be mutual, what a culture of respect would demonstrate, I would address it, and just make sure that I was perfectly clear to everyone that I expected a culture of respect across the board. You don't necessarily have to agree, but I do expect you to respect each other. And that means that you respond in a certain way, you respond timely, and that you treat others as you would want to be treated yourself. So that also helped us to focus on culture, because I was crystal clear that I wanted to make sure that not only did we respect each other, but we respect the people that we report to and the people that report to us as well.
So how would you go about, I can probably answer this based on our previous conversation, but you mentioned the progressive discipline. I guess that would be how you would kind of enforce that culture of respect if you came into an environment that didn't have that. Yeah,
absolutely. So that's one of the areas where to be perfectly honest with you, if I find that a person is repeatedly not showing that respect, they definitely need to move on, and especially my managers and team leads.
Yeah.
So I have had to make the tough decision of letting people go because they did not respect the people that reported to them, or they didn't respect the people that they were working with. So I have let people go for that without even going through the progressive discipline process, because they're going to adversely impact your culture. And if you don't address it directly, if you've talked to a person and they just refuse to be any different, or they don't see that they're doing anything wrong, then it's not the place for them.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. I think I think the respect is it's not talked about enough,
Yep. Yeah, and I think that, a lot of times people perceive being a leader as this is what I want to see and this is how you're going to do it, without really listening. I think a big part of being a leader is listening and adjusting your approach. I mean, you have to constantly re-examine your approach to see what's working and what's not, but you also have to listen to the people that have been there, in some cases longer than you have, that have different experiences, and that's where diverse teams also come into play. Just understanding where people are coming from, understanding different cultures, and making sure that you're very aware and being an empathetic leader. I mean, that's critical.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I try to make sure that I'm constantly looking at myself to see if there's something I can do better, if I can listen differently, if I've been considerate of others. But I also expect my managers and team leads to do the same thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice. And, just tipping on that point of diversity, I found that, even if you don't have the absolute best people in the spot, having that ability to hear things from other people's perspectives and other people's backgrounds makes a huge difference when it comes, especially when you're developing software or something of that aspect, because different users interact with systems differently. But also in the idea of like support and infrastructure, when you have to go talk to someone, you have different perspectives of where they're coming from. And I don't know, I just find diversity to be like one of those things that people talk about it a lot, but there's a big ROI for having a very diverse team that some people don't realize.
Yeah, there definitely is. And to that point, there were certain positions where I just wanted to make sure that we hired women or we hired more minorities. So I always tried to focus on the makeup of my team. I mean, obviously, with me being a minority, I was very aware of being in certain situations and being the only minority. Mm-hmm. And, to that point, that's something that I've tried to make sure I'm building a pipeline behind me to make sure that other minorities also have the opportunity to be in the types of positions that I've had the pleasure and privilege of occupying.
Yeah.
So I work a lot with colleges and universities and do a lot of internships to build people up so that they are able to step into the positions that I've had.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that because I noticed on your bio that you've coached some. So how does coaching kind of relate to your ability to lead people? Has that benefited you in any way?
Oh, it absolutely has. So for me, I mean, playing sports and coaching sports, you learn a lot of lessons. You learn that, number one, you have to work well with others. Number two, you have to you get into it what you put out of it. But then there's also sometimes you lose. So it's taught me patience. It's taught me how to really deal with different personalities. It's taught me that the more you practice, the better you get at it. So those are principles that I do take to whatever company or organization I'm a part of. And, I try to also put those characteristics into others as well. I mean, it really is a matter of coaching to get the outcome that you expect. So there are a lot of parallels between the two, both sports and business.
Yeah, I see so many. I have 3 kids, and my daughter, she's not necessarily a huge fan of sports, but I make her play them right now.
Yeah.
I told her until middle school, you're going to play every sport, and then you can kind of decide at that point, what you want to do. If you want to do just gymnastics, or if you want to do soccer or basketball or softball. But until middle school, you're going to do them all, because there's a lot of life lessons that I learned playing sports. That win or lose, work, hard work, discipline, all those things kind of came from sports for me. And I see so many parallels with successful people and backgrounds in sports.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I just try to also advocate for a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, in a lot of obvious ways, if you're healthy, if you are focused on being active, that does help you with stressful situations. So with my last organization with WSSC, actually we would do brown bag lunches, and one of the brown bag lunches I led was proper running techniques, and we demonstrated how to breathe properly, the right form, but just to encourage people to be more active, because sometimes one of the impediments for people not running is just that they're intimidated by it or that they're not comfortable with it, but just letting people know that people of all fitness levels can, get out and run. And sometimes injuries you get are a matter of you not having proper running form. But that was also another way for us to mix it up a bit and to get away from the monotony of just, programming or doing network engineering all day. So that was another way that we focused on morale and improving the culture.
Yeah, I've actually incorporated both of those. This company I'm at here, last year, I found out that I was the only runner in technology at the time at all. So I encouraged people to run a 5K with me, and several people came out, and I gave them training guides, and I actually wrote a book a long time ago about how to run a 5K. Initially, so I gave them copies of that, and we went, and we ran a 5K together as a team, and it was kind of fun. I made sure I beat everybody, but of course, but it was fun. And then at my last company, I had a much smaller team. I only had 6 direct reports, and I encouraged them. I said, hey, and one of the guys told me he wanted to run a half marathon. And I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's see if everybody else wants to do it. I encouraged everybody to do it. And honestly, we had half the team, 3 of us, ran a half marathon together. And it was kind of like a team building thing. And the other people that weren't running were still asking us about it. How's your training going? They were all interested. But I agree with you. Healthy lifestyle makes a huge difference at work. And some people don't realize that your brain is connected to your body, and your brain's going to perform better if your body is taking in better things, and if your body is well tuned. I can tell a difference. And when my youngest kid, he's almost 2, when he was born, I took probably several months off from running altogether, just because I didn't feel like it. I was tired, sleep, loss of sleep, and I was like, man, I got to get back into this. And after a week or 2 of running, it's like, I'm back to, having that energy at work. I'm back to being more excited about stuff. Stress levels down. I'm nicer. I'm not the gray troll anymore,
Yep. I totally get it. And I notice a difference when I'm not exercising at the level I need to as well. It does help you to be a lot more even. I've even noticed it with my kids. So all of my kids played sports. And I noticed with my middle daughter, if she's not exercising, she's a little more grumpy, so sometimes me or my wife will say, hey, you know what, you need to go for a run, and she'll come back fine. But it is a great way for all of us to deal with stress. Just get out there, whether you like running or not, maybe you like lifting, but whatever it is, just to burn off that stress.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It makes just a huge difference. That's one of the things I'm blessed with at our company. We have a walking program, where if you get your 10,000 steps a day, every day for the month, and at the end of that month you get an extra day of PTO.
Oh, nice.
So it's like an awesome incentive to get people to walk. And our IT group actually challenged one of our other departments. It was our finance department, to see which group, because we have roughly about the same amount of people, to see which group could have the most steps in a month.
I like it.
So
I like it.
When it was getting close to it, one of those finance ladies, she was outside walking around the pond. She's like, I'm not stopping.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was something at at the last company I was with. We would have a step challenge, and and when I say steps, we would walk the entire. We had 12 flights of stairs, and to see how many people could make it all up all 12 flights of stairs. So that was a way that we raised money. So for every person that made it to the 12th floor, we would donate to the water fund. And the water fund at WSSC was something that was put in place to help people who couldn't pay their water bills. So that was our way of donating to that program on behalf of whoever made it up to the 12th floor. So that was just another way for us to really encourage people to be active, but also a way for us to be philanthropic at the same time.
Yeah, man. I think that's great. That's a fantastic thing to do. I need to do more of that stuff. I'm thinking about re-challenging my team for another 5K this fall as well. Since we're getting close to about the time you should start training for that turkey trot.
That's right.
All right, man. Yeah. It's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate having you on. Is there anything else that you want to share with the audience? Any other leadership tips or fitness tips or any other advice that you have?
Well, one of the things that you mentioned the fact that you have a very diverse set of listeners and, some people that are interested in becoming CIO. I think that one critical asset that you have to have is the ability to be flexible. I was open to opportunities that came my way. As you can hear from my career, I've cut across a number of different areas, whether it's been nonprofits, county governments, public water utilities, and now with a billion-dollar corporation. Across all of those things, I've been open to new opportunities, and I think that's absolutely critical for you to be a good leader, but also for you to advance your career. You never know what opportunity is coming, so you have to be open to opportunities and be prepared to exploit those opportunities when they present themselves. So that's something that I would encourage everyone to do, to make sure that you are expanding your network, to make sure that you're focused on soft skills. That's also critical for being a very good leader. I mean, just being a person who's pleasant to be around, a person who can have conversations and to listen to other people's perspectives. So just beyond the hard skills of being able to program well and to know about project management, you also have to be a great listener. You have to be empathetic. You have to make sure that you're focused on building people. You have to make sure that you're focused on others. So those are ways that I've been successful in my career, and ways that I would encourage others to make sure that they're focused on themselves as well.
No, I think that's a very good point. There's so many people that I see them and that's like, man, you got so much potential, but you gotta look for those opportunities that are out there. And,
that's right.
Yeah, that's a great advice.
Yep. And I mean, I've seen some incredible technical people who just are not good managers or not good team members, and as a result, they were not right for the organization that I was a part of, even though they knew everything there was to know about a particular technology. So it really is important to make sure that you have a balance of both.
Mm-hmm. Well, how can people reach out to you or connect to you on maybe LinkedIn or Twitter or something like that if they have more questions or they want to follow up or just let you know that they appreciate you being on the show?
Yeah, so the only social media I'm on is LinkedIn, and that's deliberate. But you can always reach me on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so I would encourage anyone to link up with me there. Vennard Wright is my profile, and I'm the only one out there. So, please send me an invitation, and I'd be happy to connect with you.
Yeah, I'll link that up in the show notes as well. And I'll also put a link to Iron Bow's website because we definitely appreciate them allowing you to come on the show and share with us.
All right, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right, thanks so much. Hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Vennard. And if so, head on over to iTunes Apple Podcasts. I changed the name of it a few months ago and I keep forgetting. And leave me a rating and review. That'd be great. I want to read one review or two maybe right now. This one's from Mr. Wily Coyote, and it says, great podcast, love this podcast, great leadership content, applicable to everyday life, highly recommended. And this other one is from Johnny BBMA, and it says, so far so great. I have listened to all the episodes, and each episode is worth a listen. Got so many leadership tips. Thank you guys for those reviews. Greatly appreciate it. And if you're not much of a writer, at least leave a rating, bare minimum. But a review would be awesome because people can read it and be encouraged to listen to the show and check it out and grow the audience here and the other geek leaders that are out there, and to help technology as a whole just become a better place to work and a better environment for all those that are out there. Also, share the show with your friends. Share it on Twitter. Share it on LinkedIn. Share it wherever you have colleagues that work in technology. That'd be greatly appreciated. Again, thanks so much. Have a great weekend.